All right. Our agenda today is going to be pretty jam-packed. And we want to make sure that we remind you that we're going to be highlighting wherever we talk about content, identity, or community. And those will be the colors that you see. We're going to do some defining of ethnic studies. We're going to talk about culturally responsive teaching in the brain. We're going to reflect on our own cultural frame of reference. And then we'll talk about tenet 3. And we'll end our session today really reflecting about our community roles as educators of ethnic studies. Next slide. All right.
All right, y'all. So the first way that we're going to get into this is with an activity dealing with the definitions of ethnic studies. And we're going to look at 3 definitions, I think. Is it 3? Is it 4? And 4 definitions. I knew it. And one's from the framework, one's from UC Berkeley, one is from San Francisco State, and the other one is from the Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum. And we want us to think about what are the key words in each of these definitions, and you're going to highlight a few of them in each definition. So maybe 5 words, maybe 10 words, maybe 15 words. Cindy just put the activity in the chat. And as you're doing this activity, we want to do this to ground ourselves in the origins of ethnic studies that came out of the Third World Liberation Front at San Francisco State University. And we also want to do this because this is actually a lesson plan from 2 of my friends, Glenn Singley and Manisha Sims at Hiram Johnson High School. And so this is also something that you can do in your classroom with students. So please make a copy of the handout from the chat. I'm gonna click on the link and then it's gonna give you the option to make a copy. And when you open it up, you're gonna read those 4 definitions and highlight the words that you think are key in the definitions. And I forgot how much time we're gonna take for this.
It's gonna be, we'll give you all like 7 minutes to go through the definitions and take some notes. That'll be individual time. So at this point, if you wanna turn off your camera and then we'll come back together. We'll bring everybody back together to then do a breakout room for this. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and set up some breakout rooms for you all. And the idea is for you, okay, got it. Thank you everyone who was also like just writing, you know, if you're in transition, and we totally get that, no worries. Just the best we can to make do of our circumstances, totally get that. And I wanna honor that. So we're gonna jump into some breakout rooms with a partner, and we just want you to have a conversation. If you look at your worksheet, the directions are towards the bottom of your worksheet. Definitely want to start by introducing, right, yourselves to your partner. This might be the first time you're talking to them. And then we want you to take a moment to take turns reading your ideas and concepts, the things that are standing out to you, and kind of just compare, like, why did that stand out to you? What's that making you think? Or maybe something's expanding your ideas on ethnic studies. So we'll give you all 6 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then we'll check in to see how you all are doing. Okay, so I'm gonna open up the breakout rooms now.
So we wanted to take a little bit of time to think about the conversation we had with our partners, and really think about how that conversation with our partner expands our thinking around ethnic studies. And I know that at least one of my partners didn't really get to share, so maybe if you even want to just add some final thoughts that you weren't able to share with your group, we just want to take a moment to hear from all of us. And so let's take, should we say maybe 2 or 3 minutes to just share some of those thoughts? Okay.
Well, I was going to volunteer Lisa, who was my partner, who said the things that I agreed with. So, Lisa, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
Oh, well, Dwayne and I were talking about the importance of safe spaces. And that's what stood out to me, how in a classroom we would need to really, or I would anyways feel as a teacher, but also for both students and teachers to cultivate that safe space. And for me, what I'm really looking for is not just the learning as a teacher of history for nearly 30 years. I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on that, but the practice of the theories in that part of the definition, that's what stood out to me, and providing a safe space for that with students. That's what I'm really looking forward to with this group. Learning more about that and maybe even practicing some of that. And Dwayne was cut off mid-sentence, so I didn't actually get to hear what she was in the middle of saying.
I could jump in as well and share some thoughts. Is that okay? That
Yep.
work? I'm driving, so work with me here. You know, I think that there were a lot of commonalities that I really appreciated within the definition. And I felt like some of those commonalities in the way they frame, it's either communities of color, Native peoples and community of color. And so I think that there was this commonality in the language of who's the focus on. And I think that I also saw aspects like the perspectives of the knowledge of the history of these focus racial ethnic groups. So I saw those commonalities, and I also saw commonalities around challenging or critiquing or interrogating racism and forms of oppression, right? And so I saw those, and I think those are really important, because if you eliminate one of them, such as like if you were to eliminate the challenging of racism, then it becomes very a multicultural approach, where it's about diversity. And if you were to then eliminate the people of color perspectives, knowledge, and histories, then it becomes very social justice rooted. And so I think that having those together is ethnic studies. What I will add lastly is that I see that the universities tend to use it as a discipline or a field. And I think that we have the capacity within like K-12 to look at it as a curriculum and a pedagogy. So those were some things that I felt like were there, but even some elements that potentially we could expand on, that it's not just a curricular approach, but also it's the how we teach.
And thank you for sharing that. And I would say the research says the same. Devin, do you want to share that for, it's like related?
Well, just that, we were talking in our breakout group about how there's a tendency sometimes to kind of confine this into ethnic studies, and there's almost possibly even a danger that leaves other history, social science teachers off the hook to do the work they should be doing anyway. That history really needs to be about having a much more sort of deeper critique of the systems that exist, and bringing the other narratives that challenge the dominant narratives that we've grown up with, that we just have to take those concepts throughout. So on the one hand, while there's a chance that it could be a place to isolate those ideas and those conversations, the flip side of that is that it's also an opportunity for a lot of teachers to be exposed to these ideas, and maybe or more organically and or systemically woven into the courses. So I think both possibilities are out there, and it's kind of up to us to encourage it to be really broadly adopted and understood as an approach to our discipline. So that was kind of our conversation.
Dope. Thank y'all so much. And all the stuff in the comments too is really, I've been enjoying reading the comments. And so as we transition out of this particular activity, yes, thank you for making all those connections for sure. I think I saw Sasha talk about like the evolution of ethnic studies in those definitions. And I think that that's really great, a really great segue to our next activity, in which we'll be looking at taking a deep dive at identity and culture, in our particular identity and culture. So yeah, how ethnic studies has evolved, right, from Asian American studies, African American studies, now like to these larger, like to include, as you see in this definition, right, sex, gender, and just how it's continuously evolving. And so just to continue to ground ourselves in the components that we said, right, are vital to ethnic studies. So identity, community, and content. And we're going to take a deep dive into identity. This is just a definition that we have for identity and its importance to the work of ethnic studies. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. I think that's hilarious. I just got a text that my dog is snoring really loudly. And I think that's hilarious because I was literally thinking as I stayed quiet, like, I just got a new mic. I wonder if it's picking him up even more now. So it was like we were on the same wavelength. I apologize. It got darker, so he's real cozy now. Okay. So when we're doing ethnic studies work, identity is a key component, and we ask, right, our students to share a lot about their identities. But one thing that we've been really clear about is like, whatever we are asking of our students in our classrooms, we need to do that work first. Before we even translate this work into what does it look like in the classroom, we need to be doing it in spaces like this with other educators. And so for purposes of today, we're really going to focus on cultural identity. So that particular component of this definition. And the way we're going to explore that is through some excerpts from Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain. So this is from the work of Zaretta Hammond. Oh, Bailey. All right, now I'm like hyper aware that my dog's around. All right, so Zaretta Hammond was a former classroom English teacher, but she's been doing over 18 years worth of instructional design, school coaching, professional development work all around equity, culturally responsive teaching, and literacy. She is an instructor at St. Mary's College in the teacher education program. And she has written this amazing book that marries how culturally responsive teaching is actually really tied to how our brain works. So she's like marrying brain science with teaching pedagogy in a way that's easily digestible for folks like me who are not really into the sciences. So Zaretta Hammond defines culture as the way our brain makes sense of the world. She asks us to think of culture as the software for our brain's hardware. So everything that we take in, we're filtering through our different levels of culture. And so just like as a quick example, right? The image here is like showing that child like not looking directly into the adult's eyes. And I think that's like an easy example that I often have engaged in the classroom, where I would be trying to like redirect a student behavior. And they would not look me in the eye when I was trying to correct their behavior, right? And I had to really think of like, well, that also has this cultural upbringing where in like a Latino household, if you're getting reprimanded or in any way feeling like you're being redirected, like you're not looking people in the face. That is, you do not do that, or it'll escalate. And so that's just like one particular example, right? And I know that that's also true for like Asian cultures, like just like, so there's the different ways that we see the world are filtered through our cultural identities. And so she offers these 3 levels of culture, which if you want to take a deeper look at that image on the screen, the culture tree, I just dropped a link in the chat. So there's deep culture, which is at the base, right? It's your roots. It's like the roots of the tree. It's what grounds an individual and nourishes their mental health. And it's the bedrock of like a group identity, approaches to problem solving, decision making. You can see some of the examples, right, as like spirituality, cosmology, our worldview, all of those are encompassed in the deep culture. In the shallow culture, which is towards the middle, that's where that like eye contact example comes in. And it's like those unspoken rules of how you interact. And then the surface culture is the things that really lie on the surface, the things that you can see, right? And so like when we're thinking of food and song and like hairstyles or fashion that's related to a culture, like those are things that lie on the surface. And so sometimes we use surface culture as like an entry point, right? So when we think of like, yes, yeah, thank you, Rachel, for that comment in the chat. Yeah, that is different. So sometimes in classrooms, we use like the surface culture as a way to start to engage with our students, but Zaretta Hammond really is pushing for us to go as much as we can to think of our teaching pedagogies through like deeper culture to connect with students and the classroom. And one way to do that is to be a culturally responsive practitioner. And so if I could have one person volunteer to read the first quote, these are quotes coming out of her book.
I can read it.
Thank you.
The true power of culturally responsive teaching comes from being comfortable in your own skin because you are not a neutral party in the process. You can never take yourself out of the equation.
Thank you. So yeah, so she's really asking us, right, like that we do that internal work first, that identity and that cultural work first. And if somebody else could read the second bullet point.
I'll read it. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, the second one, please.
Okay, I can't tell if I'm muted or not. Okay. Culturally responsive teaching calls for teachers to take the emotional risk to examine the deeply held beliefs that influence how they respond to students.
Thank you. And that's what we're asking of you all today. So as we transition to this next activity, we're going to definitely ask you to take that emotional risk along with us. We're going to be asking you to journal. So if you could take a moment, if you need something to write with, if you want to open a new tab, you're more than welcome to. So we'll give you just a moment to get ready for our journaling activity.
So when we think of our own cultural frame of reference, we're going to engage in an activity where you will be, we will be sharing some materials for you to think about and consider. Before we do that, I wanted to share one quote, which is that if teachers want to be successful in their work with culturally diverse students, they need to first accept and understand themselves as cultural beings. This self-knowledge acts as a set of reference points that shape our mental models about teaching, learning, and dependent learners of color. So this is going to be one of those activities where we want to remind you about exercising a lot of TLC for yourself. It's an exercise that's going to hopefully encourage you to feel a little brave with your partners now that we're getting to know one another, but also a chance to be an incredible listener and empathizer with those that are going to share things that are coming up for them. And don't worry, we won't charge you for any therapy. It's not like that. I don't want you to get nervous about it, but we are going to be asking you some questions about your own cultural frame of reference. So each slide will have a couple of questions. And as you can hear, my voice is hoarse, so I'm going to ask folks to help me read them. You'll jot down some notes, pick one question per slide, jot down some notes or some bullets, and then we're going to engage in some partner discussion. So go ahead, Cindy. All right, and if someone could help me read the bullets here, surface culture.
I'll read what family folklore or stories did you hear growing up? What are some of your family traditions, holidays, foods, or rituals? Who were the heroes celebrated in your family and or community? Why? Who were the anti-heroes? Who were the bad guys?
All right, so if you want to take a couple moments to jot down some bullet points, some notes about one or more question, we're going to give you that time. All right, wonderful. I know some of you are still jotting down your last couple of ideas. We want to move on. If someone could help me read the questions we have for shallow culture, I would greatly appreciate it.
Sure, I'll read. What did your family, neighbors, and other authority figures tell you to respect? What did they tell you respect looked like? Disrespect. How were you trained to respond to emotional displays, crying, anger, sadness, happiness? What earned you praise as a child? What got you shamed or shunned?
And just like we did last time, we give you 3 minutes. Cindy will put it in the chat, and from the time she puts it in the chat, will be 3 minutes.
Thank you, Wendy, for the comment. Just clarifying too, to add to that, these questions are also coming from the book. So.
And once again, if someone could help me read the questions around a deep culture and a culture of achievement, I would greatly appreciate it.
List out the learning behaviors you believe every student should exhibit. Talk and discourse patterns, volume of interactions, time on task, collaboration or individual work, seat time versus interaction. Ask yourself, how did you come to believe this? What messages did you get about why other cultural groups succeeded or not? What did your culture teach you about intelligence? Did you grow up believing it was set at birth? Did you believe some groups were smarter than others? So we'll take 3 minutes again.
All right, let's transition to our last set of questions.
Okay, so this last set of questions are about implications for developing an intentional ethnic studies mindset. And so for this one, what did this exercise reveal about your cultural frame, if anything? Does your cultural frame of reference mirror or differ from the students you serve? How does your cultural frame inform your approach to ethnic studies? What do you need to be intentional about in your course moving forward? What new questions might you be considering now? So we'll take 3 minutes for this one as well.
And if you could kindly finish jotting down your thoughts or ideas and get ready to return. So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask you to join a partner. Each one of you will take 4 minutes. Again, to introduce yourself, you're going to share your notes around your surface, shallow, and deep cultures. And then once you've both taken 4 minutes to do that, you'll have 10 minutes to discuss the implications that what your exploration into your own identity and cultural frame of reference what implications those might have for your ethnic studies mindset. And so Cindy's going to invite you to go into breakout rooms, and we'll make sure to put the directions in the chat, but also in the little banner so we can send you. Thank you, everyone. I see we are waiting for a couple more people. Probably they're talking to come back. So we'll wait a couple seconds more as the breakout rooms out. There we go. Woo! Welcome back, everyone. We wanted to offer this time for a couple of you to comment. What was it like for you to reflect and share your cultural identity, your cultural frame of reference? If we welcome 1 or 2 people to share their ideas of what the experience was like.
Diane, you can start. Hi, Diane.
Hi, sorry, I'm driving, so it's kind of dark in my car, but I am making sure I'm checking in with these. I had a great partner that I got to talk with. We're teaching on opposite ends. She's teaching in a more elite school, but comes from a middle-class background, and I come from more of a middle-class background teaching in a Title I school. But we both said that our beliefs are, all of our students are equal. And we try to go from the background and learn that we can learn from each other's cultures and just absorb so much from each other, and that it's boring if we were all the exact same. We were talking about the fact that pre-COVID, we could do things like having large potlucks and having people bring in traditional food to their backgrounds, and that's always a great background breaker, and that we're hoping to be able to do things like that in the future.
Right, thank you. We appreciate it. And thank you for sharing while you're driving. Anyone else would like to share?
Yep.
Hi. Really quick, being able to reflect and share out my cultural identity for me, it is weird as it sounds, it's kind of like an empowering piece, because again, it's one that I matter, and my traditions and my background has a place in the space. And it was nice also to hear about others' backgrounds and to kind of open our minds about that. And one thing I really like that my partner shared out about this whole process is that reflection is key for what we need to do in order to carry on this work. And we may view it as a luxury, but at the end of the day, it's something that we have to constantly do in order to be effective ethnic studies teachers, and the ability to model that in a classroom as well.
Yes, absolutely. Our students learn about not only in elementary school about social emotional, right, pieces, but also from us as middle school and high school teachers. And coming from thinking about sharing that with our students is absolutely important for them to know our own positionality, but also why we do and why we love the work that we do. It's also really important for them. Cindy, are you muted? Are you telling us something? Okay. It is 5:24, so I'm wondering if we should move on.
Well, one second. I think Wendy had her hand up, and I was
Wendy,
muted
please.
while I was talking. No, Wendy?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I really appreciate this activity. I think it's so powerful and so essential, you know, for like as the intention of the activity for us to reflect on our own identities. One thing I wanted to share, this is an experience I've had in the past couple of years, is that you know, for me to share my experiences with my identity formation process and that vulnerability is so important. And at the same time, something that I took for granted is just because I share doesn't mean my kids then are automatically comfortable with their sharing. So there's a bridge between, you know, my vulnerability and my comfort level in sharing, and then saying, okay, guys, now it's your turn. There's a real bridge there. And for, especially as a white female, right, there's a positionality piece there where I have that space, and there's a lot of historical stuff going on with that. So just to surface that, that's been an experience for me as not to like assume, because I feel comfortable doing it. And I did it with my kids. Now they're super comfortable, and that there's a lot of additional, you know, scaffolds and bridges and other things, dynamics that go into place with that.
Thank you. Thank you for naming that. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat right now for, it has a copy of the questions and also the quotes from Zaretta Hammond's book. And yes, thank you for naming that vulnerability. Vulnerability has come up in the chat as well. It's like as something, right, this makes us vulnerable. And I just wanted to honor that, like Bettina Love describes this work as the internal work that's necessary before any outside work can start. And so as we're thinking of how that applies to ethnic studies, right, like this is a little uncomfortable. This is a little like, ooh, I have to share about myself, getting get food, you know, like, ooh, but like, that's the work. That's the work. And we may not, like our students may not feel comfortable, and it may take us, they may never feel comfortable in the year that they're with us or in the semester that they're with us, but it's like the giving choice, right? And the like different layers of culture so that they, you know, most people feel comfortable talking about surface culture. So like finding those entry points. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge that even Zaretta Hammond in her book says like, this shouldn't all be done at one time. Like you should constantly be coming back to these reflection questions. So that's why we were like, choose one or two, you know, so, and then just keep coming back to them as you keep going in your work. Okay, it is 5:27. Lord, all right, here we go. So we thought we were gonna be able to get to this, but the conversation was good, so we didn't want to stop it either. So just as a reminder that this is the reading that we started last meeting. We'll come back to this reading. We do like, just like the theory that we, you know, sat with today, the reading that we sat with today with Zaretta Hammond. We'll keep introducing new theories, new concepts, ideas in each meeting. And all of that will be housed on the website. So I'm throwing it in there one more time. So if you want to come back to this reading before we meet again, it'll be available to you. And next meeting we'll take a deep dive into tenet 3, which is develop a practice, a community grounded praxis in the teaching of content. So we'll come back to community will be our big focus point for our next meeting.
And so as we think about our journey today, we wanted to give you a recap of the work that we did today, and also realizing that we're going to come back to tenet 3, and we're going to return to having some conversations and having some more time to reflect about our roles in the community as educators. And as we did last time, we really take your feedback really into consideration when we develop our workshop. So Cindy, can you, there we go. Thank you, Cindy. If you could put the feedback form in the chat, and if you could take a couple minutes, this one's way shorter than the last one, to jot down your feedback, we appreciate it. Please thank your partners, any ideas, the universe. Thank yourself for taking the time to come and being vulnerable. Put it in the chat. We'd love to see that. And we will see you all December 9th.